Imagine this. It is the year 1453. Constantinople, the city that stood strong for more than 1,000 years, is falling. The thunder of Ottoman cannons shakes the ground, and the ancient walls that once seemed unbreakable are crumbling into dust. You are a young mother clutching your infant daughter as soldiers pour through broken gates. Just 3 days ago, your husband fell on the ramparts, dying to defend his home. And now, you hear doors crashing down around you. What waits behind that sound is not life, but something far darker. Tonight, we walk into the forgotten history of what the Ottomans did to the wives of defeated warriors. History so cruel that death itself was often seen as mercy. The fall of Constantinople did not bring peace. It brought a carefully designed process the Ottomans called the harvesting protocol. This was not random violence. It was a machine of conquest, polished over centuries. Adult men, even boys barely 12, were lined up and executed in cold precision. But women were not granted the release of death. They were separated, sorted, and measured like objects in a market. Some would be shipped away, others handed to soldiers as property. In the eyes of the conquerors, these women were no longer human beings. They were inventory. The sorting began in the open streets. Imagine standing in a crowd of women while soldiers with lists studied your face, your body, and your age as if you were livestock. Young girls, barely 14, were separated first, their value marked in ledgers with numbers instead of names. Women in their 20s and 30s were kept for labor or sold into slavery. And women over 40 were often executed on the spot, their lives considered too costly to maintain. The city's broken heart was laid bare in these squares. Mothers screaming for daughters, children torn from arms, and the smoke of burning churches filling the air. It was a scene designed not just to control bodies, but to destroy hope. Children were the empire's future harvest. Boys under 6 were absorbed into the Devshirme system, raised to forget their families, their faith, their names. Girls under 12 were sent into what officials called formation programs, designed to mold them into servants or worse. To break their mothers' hearts, crying infants were often killed on the spot, not for war, not for need, but to show absolute power. In these streets of Constantinople, the screams of children became the empire's most effective weapon. Within days, ships crowded the harbor. But these were not filled with treasures or gold. They carried people. Young women, stripped of names and clothes, were loaded into the holds of ships designed to carry human cargo. In Ottoman ledgers, they were listed alongside silk, spices, and silver, nothing more than goods for trade. Some ships carried them to Istanbul, others to Bursa or Ankara. Many never reached shore alive. A 15% loss was considered acceptable, their deaths recorded like spoiled grain thrown into the sea. To the empire, a woman's life was only numbers in an account book. When the ships arrived, the women were paraded through the empire's markets. Istanbul, Bursa, and Damascus became centers of human trade. A Greek girl of 16 might sell for 30 silver coins, while an African woman fetched different prices depending on her skin and origin. These markets were bustling, noisy, filled with perfumes and jewels, and yet their darkest trade was the silent suffering of women reduced to property. To buy a woman was as normal as buying a bolt of silk. The empire had turned slavery into an industry, run with the efficiency of a corporation. But markets were not the end of the story. Ottoman law turned widows of defeated warriors into what they called war wives. A woman whose husband had fallen was given to his killer, claimed like a prize of war. The claiming process was legal, recorded in military courts, and treated with the same formality as property disputes over land or animals. Names were stripped away, replaced with Turkish ones. Women were forced to convert, often in public, spitting on crosses or burning holy texts while their captors looked on. Refusal was not allowed. Their past lives were erased piece by piece until only obedience remained. In the heart of the empire, there were facilities more terrifying than battlefields, breeding centers. Here, women were locked in small cells, their lives controlled with cruel precision. They were fed, monitored, and forced into pregnancies designed to produce children for the empire. Medical records survive, listing women not as mothers, but as resources, numbers tied to fertility cycles, births, and survival rates. Resistance was crushed through lies and psychological warfare. Women were told their families were dead, their villages destroyed. Hope was erased because hopeless women did not rebel. The children born from these forced unions were not spared. Boys were raised as Ottoman soldiers, never knowing their mothers' true names. Girls were prepared for the same fate as their mothers, swallowed into a system designed to repeat itself generation after generation. This was not just conquest, it was the creation of a cycle of trauma that reshaped entire societies. Families scarred their daughters to make them undesirable. Villages built secret hiding places only for Ottomans to drag them into the open. Across continents, cultures bent and reshaped themselves around this terror. The Ottoman Empire left behind not only mosques and palaces, but also records, detailed ledgers, breeding registers, and market accounts. In their eyes, there was nothing shameful to hide. They wrote about women as property, the way we write about taxes or crops. This history is not legend nor rumor. It is documented in ink and parchment, buried in archives waiting for those brave enough to read. Tonight, we remember not the power of armies, but the cries of women and children who were silenced for centuries. And as we close our eyes, let us carry their story with us, so they are not forgotten in the dust of time. Good night.